When a man cannot stop thinking about someone, his presence speaks before his voice ever does. There is a subtle shift that words cannot capture. You feel it in the way he shows up, in the way he lingers a little longer when you speak, in the quiet pauses that seem to hold something unsaid. Presence is not about physical proximity. It is the vibration that remains even when he is far away. When a man's thoughts become intertwined with another person, his energy becomes a silent messenger. You may not hear it, but you feel it. You sense it in the way his attention bends toward you, how his gestures become more intentional, and how even his stillness feels different when you are near. There is a saying that what the mind focuses on expands. When a man cannot redirect his focus away from someone, his presence becomes charged with that attention. Every small action, every word, every glance carries the imprint of that inner world. Even when he tries to hide it, the body betrays the mind. His eyes may look calm, but they hesitate. His words may sound measured, but they carry a trace of hesitation, as if trying to hide a secret he cannot control. Obsession is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it lives quietly inside a person, shaping how he breathes, how he listens, how he moves through a space shared with another. Presence is more honest than language. It cannot lie. A man may try to convince himself that he is indifferent, that he has moved on, that he is not affected. But the truth of what he feels radiates through his presence. When his thoughts are consumed by someone, even silence becomes expressive. The tone of his voice changes when he speaks her name. His rhythm shifts when she enters the room, even when he avoids looking directly at her. The awareness of her presence bends the air around him. It is not what he does consciously. It is what his energy does without his permission. When the mind is occupied by longing, presence becomes a mirror. It reflects back the emotional landscape within. You can see how a man's emotions move not through what he declares, but through how he appears when he's not declaring anything. Obsession gives him away in the smallest things, the way he replays moments in his head, the way he remembers details no one else would notice, the way he waits for a message but pretends not to. You notice it in the stillness that follows your words, in the almost invisible pause that happens before he responds. Presence reveals what emotion tries to conceal. The more a man tries to suppress his feelings, the more his energy leaks through the cracks of his restraint. There is a weight to his attention, a pull that becomes noticeable even to those around him. His laughter sounds a little more alive when you are near. His mood shifts when you are distant. He tries to remain centered, but the center of his balance quietly moves toward you. This is not manipulation or performance, it is the natural gravity of emotion. The mind can attempt control, but presence always tells the truth. What makes presence so revealing is that it cannot be rehearsed. You can plan your words, but you cannot choreograph your energy. When someone holds space in your thoughts long enough, your body and aura begin to mirror that attachment. The way he breathes changes, his focus narrows, and even his silence gains depth. People around him may not understand it, but they can feel it. They sense that something invisible has captured his attention. Presence does not shout. It vibrates, it hums, it radiates through the air quietly but unmistakably. This kind of obsession does not always mean romance. Sometimes it means deep admiration, unresolved emotion, or unfinished connection. Whatever form it takes, it reshapes his presence. He might act more composed, but there is a tension beneath that calm. He might appear distant, but his distance carries awareness. When he cannot stop thinking about someone, his internal world begins to orbit that person, and his external behavior slowly follows. He might find reasons to cross paths, small excuses to interact, or moments of silence that stretch longer than usual. These are not deliberate strategies. They are the body's unconscious as expressions of emotional focus. Presence reveals obsession through repetition. When the same person appears again and again in his mind, the energy forms a pattern. You see it in how often he mentions her name, casually in conversation, how he remembers dates, small gestures, or words spoken long ago. You see it in his reactions, subtle, delayed, but charged with emotion. The body reacts before the intellect does. Even when he wants to seem unaffected, his presence speaks a language his logic cannot censor. His stillness becomes louder than movement, his silence becomes more eloquent than speech. When a man's presence begins to reveal his inner attachment, it also becomes a teacher to him. He begins to notice how much of his mind is occupied, How much energy is spent thinking, imagining, remembering? This awareness can feel both grounding and unsettling. Obsession has a way of dissolving self-control, of making him aware of his own vulnerability. In that vulnerability, he begins to see how powerful emotion truly is, not because it makes him act, but because it shapes who he becomes when he's thinking of someone. Presence is the echo of thought. When the same thought repeats often enough, it takes on form. That form can be felt before it is seen. A man's presence begins to carry the weight of what he cannot release. Sometimes you feel it in his eyes. They wander less, as if fixed on a memory. Sometimes in his words, careful, deliberate, carrying the weight of reflection. Sometimes in the way he stands, a little more still, as if waiting for something unseen to unfold. His entire being becomes a vessel for unspoken emotion. The truth about presence is that it does not require contact. A man can be miles away and still be felt. Energy does not respect distance, it travels through attention. When someone occupies his thoughts, his presence expands beyond physical form. Even through absence, you feel him. The mind sends signals, and the heart translates them through vibration. That is why some people feel near even when they are far away. It is the language of emotional energy spoken through presence. Presence reveals obsession because it cannot be disguised. It shows in how a man listens, in how he remembers, in how he reacts when he hears your name. It appears in the details he notices and the ones he refuses to forget. It is there in the pause between his words, in the sigh he doesn't explain, in the stillness he tries to mask. Presence carries truth long after words have fallen silent. It tells the story of where his attention lives, where his emotions travel, and where his mind returns when the world becomes quiet. When a man cannot stop thinking about someone, the world around him begins to blur. The ordinary things that once held his focus start to lose their weight. His attention becomes restless, always searching, always circling back to the same image, the same memory, the same feeling he cannot release. Distraction becomes impossible because his mind no longer obeys him. It follows its own rhythm, the rhythm of longing. Even in moments of silence, even when surrounded by noise, his thoughts drift back to that one person who has taken root inside his awareness. There is a strange stillness that comes with obsession. The body may move through routines, but the mind lingers elsewhere. He may sit at his desk, answer messages, fulfill his duties. Yet beneath the surface, there is another world unfolding, a world built entirely around one person. The mind revisits conversations, imagines possibilities, replays gestures that meant more than they appeared to. This quiet loop becomes his unseen ritual. He does not intend to dwell there, but every attempt to escape brings him back deeper. When the heart becomes involved, the mind becomes ungovernable. You can discipline your schedule, but you cannot discipline your emotion. Emotion has its own intelligence, ancient, persistent, and beyond logic. When a man tries to push away what he feels, the feeling grows stronger. The more he tries to think of something else, the more vividly her presence appears. He notices small things, a sound, a scent, a word, and each of them becomes a thread that pulls him back toward the memory of her. This is how distraction fails, because emotion refuses to be erased through effort. Distraction becomes impossible not because he lacks willpower, but because attention follows energy. And where energy is bound by emotion, attention becomes its shadow. When someone occupies the emotional space within him, every path his mind takes eventually curves back to that center. He might focus for a while on his work, on conversations, on daily demands, but his awareness drifts like a leaf caught in a current. No matter how far it floats, the current always brings it back. The mind cannot find rest until the heart is at peace. There are moments when he catches himself staring into space, unaware of how much time has passed. He realizes that his mind had wandered again, to her voice, to her laughter, to the way she looked at him once. These flashes of remembrance arrive uninvited, but he does not resist them anymore. At first, he might have tried to suppress them, to distract himself with business or logic. But the mind, once touched by genuine emotion, becomes magnetized. It clings to the image that awakened it. Distraction then is no longer avoidance. It becomes surrender disguised as activity. He may appear calm to others, but inside him there is movement. Constant, invisible movement. Thoughts loop and spiral, turning over the same emotions in a quiet repetition. Every attempt to focus on something else feels temporary, like placing a thin curtain over sunlight. The light still finds a way through. The presence of the one he cannot stop thinking about becomes an undertone in every song, a shadow behind every moment of quiet. The deeper the emotion, the more persistent the echo. Distraction becomes impossible because emotion does not exist in the same time as thought. Thought lives in seconds and minutes. Emotion lives in continuity. It doesn't dissolve with distraction. It waits. When he tries to move on, emotion waits beneath his awareness, patient and unchanging. It greets him again when the noise fades. It whispers in the spaces between his responsibilities. This is why some people feel unforgettable, not because of what they did, but because of how deeply they entered the rhythm of someone's emotional landscape. He might tell himself that he is fine, that he is focused, that life must continue. But the body reveals otherwise. He checks his phone more often. He notices familiar patterns in strangers' faces. A place, a color, a certain time of day. All of them remind him of her without permission. These small triggers reveal that the mind is not free. His attention is tethered. He might engage in conversations, laughter, or distraction, but underneath every moment there is a quiet longing. The more he denies it, the more alive it becomes. When distraction fails, awareness deepens. He starts to realize that what he feels cannot simply be ignored, it must be understood. Obsession often hides lessons. It teaches where attachment lies, where desire lives, where the self has given away its power. A man who cannot stop thinking about someone eventually confronts himself. He begins to see that it is not just about her. It is about the part of him that she awakened. Distraction fails because emotion demands recognition. It calls him to look inward, not outward. Even when he occupies himself with work, conversations, or noise, his mind keeps circling back. At night, when the world quiets, the thoughts return with more intensity. The hours of darkness amplify emotion. The mind becomes honest when there are no distractions left. He lies awake replaying words, imagining what could have been, or wondering what she is doing at that very moment. The night reveals what the day conceals. No distraction can mute the frequency of genuine connection once it has been felt. Over time, this inability to be distracted begins to change him. He moves differently, speaks differently, and even his silence takes on new meaning. People around him sense it, but cannot explain it. They may call it focused detachment or melancholy, but what it truly is presence redirected inward. His energy is caught between thought and emotion, between memory and desire. The world outside loses its clarity because his inner world has become too bright, too loud, too consuming. When a man cannot distract himself, he is forced to confront the truth of his own heart. He realizes that emotions do not obey the will. They rise like tides, unstoppable, cyclical, ancient. He learns that the more he resists them, the more they persist. He begins to notice how every attempt to escape brings him closer to what he tries to avoid. The mind becomes a mirror reflecting his attachment, and every reflection reminds him that distraction is not freedom. True focus returns only when he accepts what he feels instead of running from it. Distraction becomes impossible because connection leaves an imprint deeper than thought. You cannot distract yourself from energy that has merged with your own. It follows you in silence, in breath, in the rhythm of your heartbeat. Every moment of stillness becomes a reminder. Every attempt to look away reveals another reflection. The world becomes filled with symbols of her, a song, a phrase, a passing resemblance, as if life itself is conspiring to remind him of what he cannot forget. And so he continues moving through his days, half here and half elsewhere, his body present but his mind tethered to an invisible thread. He learns that distraction cannot silence longing, because longing is not noise. It is the echo of connection that once awakened something true within him. Before a man ever acts differently, before his words change, before he begins to show signs of affection or hesitation, something far more subtle happens. His energy shifts. Energy is the silent prelude to behavior. It moves beneath awareness, shaping his tone, his rhythm, his reactions, and the quiet pauses between them. You can sense it even when he says nothing. When a man begins to think about someone constantly, when his emotions start to orbit a single person, his energy begins to rearrange itself long before his conscious mind realizes it. Every human interaction is an exchange of energy, though most people mistake it for words or gestures. But energy moves first. When a man's heart begins to attach, his energy field expands in the direction of that attachment. It becomes warmer, more open, more responsive. You feel it in his presence. a different kind of attentiveness, a quiet pull that wasn't there before. His body language softens. His eyes linger a little longer. Even in silence, you can feel that he is no longer fully detached. Something within him has begun to lean toward you, even if his words still pretend otherwise. The shift in energy is always the first truth. Behavior often tries to catch up or conceal it, but energy cannot lie. When someone captures a man's attention on a deeper level, his emotional current subtly changes course. His focus begins to flow toward that person. His energy begins to vibrate differently, and the way he moves through his day starts to reflect that unseen transformation. Even if he continues his usual routines, there's a difference in how he occupies them. His attention, once scattered, now carries an invisible thread connecting back to a single thought: her. You may notice this energy shift in the way he listens. Listening becomes less mechanical, more alive. He's no longer just hearing words, he's feeling them. He's studying tone, remembering details, watching expressions without realizing he's doing it. The energy of curiosity begins to merge with the energy of care. It is a subtle but powerful change, one that cannot be acted out or imitated because it is genuine and instinctive. Behavior may take time to reveal this, but energy reveals it immediately. Energy shifts before behavior because emotion lives beneath awareness. The body and mind are instruments through which energy expresses itself, but the energy moves first, quietly, invisibly, preparing the ground for what will later be seen as action. It is the invisible cause behind the visible effect. When a man starts to feel drawn towards someone, he might not understand it at first. He may even try to resist it. But resistance does not stop energy. It only makes him more aware of its presence. His thoughts become restless, his emotions unsettled, his calm disrupted. Something unseen has begun to move within him, and it demands his attention. Energy does not announce its arrival with intensity. It whispers through intuition. You can sense it in a glance that lasts a moment too long, in a text that seems unnecessary but sincere, in the tone of a simple "How are you?" that carries more warmth than before. These are the early signs of transformation. The behavior may still appear ordinary, but the energy behind it is no longer neutral. His interest, once casual, now has intention behind it. His gestures become small offerings of attention. His silence begins to hold meaning. As the energy continues to build, it begins to affect his behavior more obviously. He becomes more present around you, more aware of your mood, more influenced by your presence. He may not fully understand why he feels different, but he does. His laughter becomes more frequent when you're near. His expression changes when you speak. His body leans toward you unconsciously. All of this begins with the unseen movement of energy. Behavior simply becomes the reflection of that inner current. Energy shifts are also felt in distance. Even when he tries to stay away, the connection hums quietly between you. You feel his awareness, his attention, his hesitation. Energy travels beyond words. It is what makes two people think of each other at the same time or feel a sudden wave of emotion without reason. When a man's energy shifts, it carries his thoughts and emotions with it, creating a field of resonance that reaches beyond physical presence. You may not see him, but you sense him. You may not speak, but his silence feels heavy with awareness. When energy moves, the body follows. His behavior might change gradually, small gestures first, like asking more questions, offering help, or being attentive in ways he wasn't before. But these actions are not strategic, they are instinctive. They arise from a natural reorientation of his energy. His emotional compass begins to point toward the person who has occupied his mind. Even when he tries to appear indifferent, his behavior eventually betrays him, because the body can only act in alignment with where the energy already lives. Energy also reveals what behavior tries to hide. Sometimes a man will appear calm and unaffected, but his energy feels unsettled, slightly nervous, slightly restless. He may look composed, but you can feel that something within him is in motion. His words may sound casual, yet his eyes reveal focus. His actions may remain consistent, but the vibration around him feels different, softer, more open, or more uncertain. When energy shifts, everything else becomes subtly charged. The space between two people feels more alive. This shift is not always comfortable for him. When energy begins to move towards someone, it challenges his sense of control. The heart starts to influence the mind, and he finds himself reacting to things he used to overlook. The sound of her laughter, a text reply, a memory, all of it begins to stir something deeper. He might notice that he's more easily affected, that his emotions rise quicker and stay longer. This is the moment where behavior struggles to remain neutral while energy continues to evolve underneath it. Energy shifts before behavior does because emotion is faster than thought. The energetic body responds instantly to feeling, while the logical mind takes time to interpret it. That's why he may not understand why he acts differently around her, why he remembers her words, why his mood changes in her presence. The energy has already moved, his awareness is simply catching up. And by the time he notices, the shift has already taken root. You can tell when someone's energy has changed because their presence feels different even when they do nothing. The air around them feels heavier or lighter. Their silence feels full, not empty. Their gaze feels more deliberate. Energy makes the unseen visible through sensation. It communicates through intuition, through the quiet recognition that something has changed even though everything looks the same. Eventually, behavior begins to mirror the energy fully. The things he says, the choices he makes, the way he moves around you, they all begin to reflect what was first felt long before it was expressed. But by then, the energy has already written the script. Every action that follows is simply a physical echo of what has already shifted within him. The true beginning of connection, attraction, or attachment is always energetic. What we see as behavior is merely the delayed reflection of that invisible transformation that happened in silence, long before words were spoken or gestures were made. There are moments in life when closeness blinds us to what we feel, and distance opens our eyes. When a man begins to think about someone he can no longer see every day, something within him starts to awaken. The absence becomes a mirror, reflecting the depth of what presence once concealed. Emotional awareness rarely blossoms in the noise of constant contact. It grows in the silence that follows separation. Distance becomes the space where feeling matures, where emotion turns into understanding, and where longing becomes awareness. When he is near someone, his senses are full. Conversation, touch, the sound of a voice, the comfort of familiarity. In that nearness, emotion often hides behind routine. He may not realize how much connection means because it is always available. But when the space between them widens, when silence replaces daily exchange, the heart begins to speak a different language. Suddenly, he notices the weight of absence. He becomes aware of the little things that once passed unnoticed. The tone of laughter, the subtle comfort of shared silence, the way her presence softened the edges of his day. Distance becomes the teacher of awareness. In absence, there is no distraction, no illusion of control. He can no longer rely on gestures or proximity to maintain connection. All that remains is reflection. And in reflection, emotion gains clarity. He begins to understand that attachment is not measured by words spoken, but by thoughts that return uninvited. He starts to recognize how often his mind drifts back to her, how certain memories replay themselves like quiet mantras. Through this repetition, he becomes aware not just of how much he misses her, but why he misses her. What her presence awakened within him that the world around him cannot replace. The distance becomes a kind of silence that reveals everything noise used to hide. In closeness, people speak to be heard. In distance, they listen to themselves. When he is alone with his thoughts, he begins to see his own emotions more clearly. The patterns of attachment emerge. He realizes how certain moments left imprints deeper than he expected, how emotion lingers not because of dependency, but because of recognition. Recognition of something genuine, something rare. The absence of the other person becomes a lens, magnifying the truth of what was always there. Emotional awareness is not born in intensity, it is born in quietness. When the world grows still, emotion finally has room to breathe. Distance gives that space. He may feel discomfort at first, restlessness, confusion, the ache of missing someone, but beneath that ache lies awakening. What was once taken for granted becomes precious. What seemed ordinary becomes meaningful. This is the paradox of distance. It hurts, but it clarifies. The heart, stripped of immediate comfort, begins to perceive its own depth. When a man begins to feel the weight of separation, he often tries to distract himself. He immerses in work, routine, or silence. But no matter how much he occupies his hands, the mind continues to return to the one who is absent. In that repetition lies recognition. He notices how deeply she has become woven into the rhythm of his thoughts. The more he tries to silence it, the more he realizes it's not about memory, it's about presence. Even in absence, she remains. This realization deepens emotional awareness. He starts to understand that connection is not physical, it is energetic, emotional, and spiritual. Distance transforms feeling into reflection. It gives emotion time to unfold, to evolve from impulse into insight. In closeness, one feels; in distance, one understands what that feeling means. He begins to ask deeper questions. Was it love, attachment, comfort, or growth? What did her presence teach him about himself? These questions do not arise in the rush of emotion. They surface only when emotion has space to echo. Distance allows him to hear those echoes. It becomes the ground where wisdom grows out of longing. Sometimes, distance reveals the truth that closeness could not. It exposes what was real and what was illusion. If the connection was shallow, distance erases it. But if it was deep, distance amplifies it. The emotions that fade were never rooted deeply. The ones that remain are those that were authentic. Through absence, he learns to distinguish between attachment and appreciation, between desire and connection. Emotional awareness becomes the process of learning what truly matters, what remains even after everything else has been removed. In the quiet of distance, memories become companions. He revisits moments not to escape the present, but to understand them differently. A simple conversation from the past now carries meaning. A glance once overlooked now feels profound. He realizes that awareness grows when the noise of daily life disappears. Distance does not just separate two people, it separates illusion from truth. It forces the heart to confront what is real. There is a sacred kind of stillness that emerges when he accepts the space between them. At first, distance feels like emptiness, but over time it becomes presence of another kind. He begins to feel her not through sight or sound, but through energy. He senses her in moments of quiet thought, in emotions that rise without reason, in synchronicities that remind him of her existence. This awareness deepens his emotional intelligence. He learns that love, or connection, is not dependent on physical touch. It is an awareness of shared vibration, of unspoken understanding. Through distance, emotion matures into gratitude. What once was longing turns into appreciation. What once was confusion becomes clarity. The more he reflects, the more he realizes that connection was not meant to be owned or controlled. It was meant to be experienced, to awaken parts of himself he had forgotten. Distance allows him to integrate those lessons. It turns emotion into insight. Emotional awareness grows because distance forces introspection. When she is no longer around to respond, he must listen to his own reactions. When there are no words exchanged, he must rid his own silence. This is where emotional depth is born, in the moments when there is no external validation, only inner observation. He becomes aware not just of her absence, but of himself. He begins to notice how emotion moves through him, how attachment forms, how memories trigger response. He sees the architecture of his own heart. And so, distance becomes a spiritual mirror. It shows him what remains after connection shifts from physical to internal. The awareness that grows through it is not just about her, it is about him, about his capacity to feel, to reflect, to understand the invisible threads that connect two human beings. Emotional awareness does not emerge from constant contact. It arises from the quiet recognition that even when everything external is removed, something inward still remains. Through distance, he discovers the landscape of his own emotion, vast, silent, and alive with understanding. When a man begins to feel something deeply, his first instinct is often not to express it, but to contain it. He does not always speak of his emotions, not because he lacks them, but because they are too vast, too delicate to expose. The world teaches him that to be strong is to be in control, to remain composed, to move forward unaffected. Yet beneath that calm surface lies a truth few acknowledge, that his restraint, his silence, his stillness are not signs of absence, but of depth. Vulnerability hides behind the appearance of strength, like water beneath a frozen lake. It is there, moving quietly, unseen but alive. When a man cannot stop thinking about someone, when emotion begins to grow within him, it rarely shows through dramatic gestures. Instead, it reveals itself in subtle tension. A hesitation before speaking, a longer glance, a quieter tone. On the outside, he may appear steady, even distant, but inside him something has shifted. Emotion is stirring and his instinct is to guard it. Discarding is not coldness, it is protection. It is the ancient reflex of the heart that knows the cost of openness. What looks like self-control is often the body's way of keeping emotion from spilling into a world that may not understand it. Strength and vulnerability are not opposites. They are reflections of each other. The man who feels deeply must carry both. Vulnerability gives emotion its depth while strength gives it form. Without vulnerability, emotion has no authenticity. Without strength, it has no boundary. When he stands still in front of what he feels, holding it quietly within, that is not indifference. It is the balance between exposure and restraint. His silence does not mean he does not care. It means he is overwhelmed by caring. The world often misunderstands masculine silence. It assumes it means detachment, when in truth it is the language of someone processing what words cannot contain. A man's silence often hides his deepest tenderness. He may seem unmoved, but his energy tells another story. You can sense it in his presence, the slight softening of his expression, the gentleness in his tone, the patience in his responses. These are the small fractures in the armor where emotion seeps through. Vulnerability does not always appear as tears or confession. Sometimes it wears the mask of composure. When a man is vulnerable, he rarely announces it. His vulnerability appears in the way he listens more carefully, how he remembers small details, how he begins to care about things that never used to matter. He tries to act normal, but his awareness betrays him. He starts to notice moods, silences, or changes in tone. He becomes more attuned because his energy has connected to someone else's frequency. That sensitivity is vulnerability in disguise. An openness to emotional energy that he can neither control nor ignore. True vulnerability makes him cautious. It reminds him that to feel is to risk, and to risk is to lose control. And yet, that very awareness of risk is what awakens strength. He begins to hold his emotions with discipline, not because he wants to hide them, but because he wants to protect their meaning. This is where strength and vulnerability merge, when he learns to feel fully but act with balance. What the world sees as stoicism is often just the stillness of someone managing deep emotion with care. Inside him, there is often a quiet battle between the desire to express and the fear of exposure. He wants to reach out, to confess, to act, but a voice within reminds him of the fragility of trust. He hesitates, not because his emotion is weak, but because it is sacred to him. Vulnerability makes him human. Restraint keeps him grounded. He wears strength as a mask, not to deceive, but to protect the part of him that is still learning to trust the tenderness of feeling. When he finally allows himself to be vulnerable, it rarely looks dramatic. It appears in gestures, in the way he shows up, in how he supports without being asked, in the consistency that replaces grand declarations. He might not speak the language of vulnerability directly, but his actions translate it. Each act of care becomes an expression of emotion he cannot yet name. Vulnerability is the energy beneath the behavior, and strength is the structure that allows it to exist safely. The paradox of vulnerability is that it demands courage. To feel deeply in a world that celebrates detachment is an act of quiet rebellion. When a man chooses to stay connected to his feelings instead of numbing them, he is displaying a form of strength that few recognize. He allows himself to experience discomfort, uncertainty, and emotional exposure, not because he enjoys it, but because it connects him to truth. The courage to feel becomes the bridge between strength and softness. Vulnerability also manifests through patience. When he waits instead of forcing outcomes, when he chooses understanding over reaction, when he allows space for emotion to unfold naturally, that is vulnerability clothed in wisdom. He accepts that he cannot control everything, and in that acceptance lies real power. True strength is not in dominance, but in surrender. The willingness to stay open even when it hurts. There are moments when his vulnerability shows through contradiction. He may withdraw to protect himself, then return because he cannot stay away. He may act indifferent, yet his actions betray deep concern. These contradictions are not weakness. They are the movements of a heart learning how to exist in both strength and tenderness. The mask of composure is not falsehood. It is a bridge, a temporary form of protection while he learns how to exist openly within emotion. A man's strength often emerges from the very vulnerability he hides. When he has felt loss, longing, or love that changed him, it builds a quiet foundation inside him. He becomes more compassionate, more aware, more patient. These qualities grow from emotional experience, not from avoidance. Vulnerability refines strength. It teaches humility, empathy, and presence. The man who has allowed himself to feel deeply and survived it carries a strength that is not hardened but softened, not defensive but centered. In truth, The mask of strength is rarely meant to deceive others. It is meant to hold the self together while the heart reorganizes itself around feeling. When a man begins to love, miss, or care, he must navigate emotions that challenge his usual structure. He learns how to maintain balance while carrying emotional weight. He learns that strength is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to hold it without breaking. What appears as control is often the grace of someone protecting something precious within. Vulnerability masks itself as strength because true feeling demands stability. A man cannot offer emotion recklessly. He must first find his center. That is why he builds quiet walls, not to keep others out, but to keep his emotions safe until they are understood. What seems like indifference is often the time it takes for feeling to mature into awareness. His restraint is not a lack of care, but the expression of respect for the emotion, for the connection, for the fragility of what he feels. Strength is the surface, vulnerability is the depth. One protects, the other reveals. Together they create the quiet, powerful balance of a man who feels deeply but moves with intention. His silence is not emptiness, it is protection. His composure is not detachment, it is reverence for what he feels but cannot yet express. Beneath every calm gesture, beneath every measured word, there lives a heart that knows how fragile truth can be and how sacred it is to feel it fully. In a world full of fleeting gestures and temporary affection, consistency becomes the only real language of truth. Words may sound sincere, expressions may appear convincing, but it is time that unmasks emotion. When a man truly feels something for someone, his consistency becomes his confession. He may not always know how to articulate his emotion, but he shows it through the rhythm of his behavior. The calls that never stop coming, the effort that doesn't fade, the presence that remains even when circumstances shift. Emotion can hide behind silence, but consistency always reveals what the heart refuses to let go of. When a man cannot stop thinking about someone, his patterns begin to shift. It's not what he says once that matters, it's what he continues to do without being reminded. Consistency is not dramatic. It does not shout. It does not seek attention. It simply repeats itself quietly over time. That repetition is what exposes the depth of feeling that words often fail to capture. Anyone can act out of impulse, but only genuine emotion sustains effort through time, distraction, and distance. Consistency reveals authenticity because pretense cannot survive it. People can pretend to care for a while, but pretense is exhausting. It fades once the novelty disappears. True emotion, however, renews itself naturally. It finds strength in continuity. When a man feels deeply, his care becomes part of his rhythm. Effortless, instinctive, woven into the way he moves through life. He remembers, he shows up, he stays aware. Even if he tries to appear indifferent, his actions betray him through small, persistent gestures that carry quiet devotion. Consistency does not require perfection, it requires presence. When a man's emotions are real, he doesn't always express them flawlessly, but he returns, again and again. He might become silent for a while, lost in thought or circumstance, but his presence never disappears entirely. He finds his way back, drawn not by obligation but by connection. Consistency is how genuine emotion breathes, not through constant intensity, but through reliability. It is the heartbeat that continues beneath everything else. There is a rhythm to emotion that is only revealed through time. When the initial spark of attraction fades, when the comfort of familiarity replaces excitement, what remains is the truest measure of care. Consistency is the bridge between passion and commitment. It transforms emotion from a temporary feeling into a steady current. A man who truly feels does not fluctuate with mood or convenience. His energy may change, but his presence does not. This is how emotion reveals its authenticity, not in how loudly it begins, but in how quietly it endures. Many men hide their emotions behind action because words feel too fragile. But if you watch carefully, you can read his heart through repetition. The way he keeps checking in, the way he notices small changes, the way he continues to protect what he values even when no one is watching. These are the signs of true emotion. Consistency exposes what pride hides. It is the evidence of care that does not seek recognition, the quiet expression of love that asks for nothing in return. When emotion is real, effort becomes natural. He does not calculate or perform, he simply acts from feeling. His consistency is not planned. It is a byproduct of genuine investment. Even when he is tired, busy, or distant, something within him reminds him of her. He may not speak about it, but his small acts of presence, remembering, reaching out, understanding, continue to happen. These are not gestures of obligation, they are expressions of connection. Emotion that is honest cannot remain still, it moves through consistent attention. Consistency also reveals how emotion matures. In the beginning, feelings are often intense, filled with excitement and uncertainty. But as time passes, the true depth of emotion shows not in intensity, but in endurance. When a man continues to care, even after the novelty fades, when he remains attentive without being reminded, it shows that his feelings are not dependent on circumstance. He does not stay because it is easy. He stays because his emotion has grown roots. Consistency is how emotion transforms from reaction to intention. There is a quiet strength in a man who remains steady even when feelings are not reciprocated in the way he hoped. His care does not vanish out of disappointment. His energy may withdraw, but his respect, his sincerity, his genuine regard, they stay intact. That steadiness reveals emotional integrity. It shows that his emotion was never about control or validation. It was about truth. Only genuine emotion can remain consistent when there is nothing to gain. Over time, consistency becomes a form of language. Every message sent, every thought remembered, every effort maintained speaks louder than declarations. When he keeps showing up, even in small ways, it reveals a truth his words might never capture. Consistency does not need to impress, it needs only to persist. It is the evidence that emotion has matured beyond desire and into devotion. It is not about intensity but endurance. The quiet strength that says, I am still here, without saying anything at all. Consistency also tests emotion. It exposes those built on excitement and reveals those rooted in sincerity. Temporary emotions fade when life becomes complicated, but genuine ones grow more grounded. When a man's feelings are real, time does not weaken them, it refines them. He may express them differently as he grows, but the core remains untouched. That is the beauty of consistency. It transforms emotion into something timeless, something that endures change without losing essence. Sometimes, consistency is not visible in grand gestures but in stability. The way he responds calmly instead of reacting harshly. The way he chooses patience instead of walking away. The way he remains respectful even when things don't go his way. These are the quiet ways emotion expresses its truth. They do not attract attention, but they hold immense strength. Consistency in conduct reveals emotional awareness. It shows he values connection, not for pleasure or pride, but for meaning. Even in absence, consistency continues. When he cannot be physically present, his energy still lingers through thought, intention, memory. He does not forget easily because his emotion has become part of his being. That constant awareness, that enduring consideration, is the invisible proof of feeling. Distance may change routine, but it cannot erase energy. When a man truly feels, he carries the other person within him wherever he goes. His consistency becomes spiritual, transcending physical limits. Consistency is not built from perfection, it is built from authenticity. A man who is consistent is not one who never falters, but one who returns even after he does. He may make mistakes, withdraw, or go silent, but his return reveals truth. His effort to reconnect, to rebuild, to keep showing up, that is where real emotion lives. It is not the grand beginning that defines him, but the quiet continuation. The greatest illusion is that emotion is measured by intensity, but intensity burns fast, consistency lasts. The strongest connections are not those filled with constant excitement, but those sustained by steady, genuine care. Time reveals what words cannot. When a man keeps showing up long after the world expects him to move on, when his behavior aligns with his emotions without needing to prove them, that is when truth becomes visible. Consistency is the purest expression of emotion because only what is real can remain.